Good morning, everyone. I'll give everyone a second to get logged in here. Happy Saturday. What a week. This world that we're all living in, and I include myself in that equation because I'm one-on-one helping so many of you with your cases, your battles, your strategy, with the consulting side of my practice. It takes a toll. I feel all of you and what you're going through. Sometimes it puts me right back in that spot, and this journey is not an easy one. And so I know even on a normal week, this battle can be daunting, but I just want to let you know I'm feeling it right alongside you. I was supposed to do a Zoom call with a couple of girlfriends last night, and I sent them a message and I just said, I know we're scheduled to talk at 5. I'm going to be comatose by then. I've pulled a couple of really long days this past week. So it's been a busy week, and I know this is taking a toll on everyone. So my heart is with you, is my point. I know that times are chaotic, and I see, good morning. I see people logging in and joining in. Libra, Aquarius, Leo. I'm a Libra. I always say there was a funny point in my custody case where, I had started the One Mom's Battle blog, but I was also working a bunch of part-time jobs or jobs to try to feed my kids, as you know how that is. And one of the jobs that I took on was as a blogger for a local wedding organization. So I said, talk about being a Libra. I'm over here balancing, a divorce blog with the wedding blog. So it's a funny little story. I've started a file called Coffee with Tina. You guys have been sending in a lot of questions, which I'm really happy to see. I think I'm going to keep doing this. I'm kind of taking it month by month. I'm doing these Coffee with Tinas every Saturday morning, especially during isolation, but we'll see how it goes. I've had a lot of really good feedback, and a lot of people really look forward to this. So for now, I plan to keep doing it in May, and we'll just take it month by month. So keep joining me, keep sending in your questions. If you do have a question that you'd like to submit, Long Beach, hello Long Beach, you can send it to coffeedatewithtina@gmail.com. Keep it as brief and focused. Unfortunately, don't have a lot of time well, I can't share background here, so it needs to be a question that other people can relate to. Those are the ones that I usually select to read and to answer. With that said, oh, and you have to see my coffee cup. It says, I divorced a narcissist. What's your superpower? These are available on the One Mom's Battle Etsy store, which you can find, where do we have it? If you go to my Instagram account, you can order your very own mug. I know if you have kids that can read, probably not a good plan, but if you have weekends free or week on week off schedules, it can be your coffee mug to use during those times. So if you would like to submit, feel free to email a question. Keep it brief, keep it direct and to the point, and I will do my best to answer it. So we've had a lot of questions come through, and I've selected a couple. We'll go through here. One of the questions, and it comes up often because it's a topic I talk about a lot. Oh, but first I need to do my Spain. Welcome from Spain. I need to do my fine print, which is I'm not an attorney. I'm not qualified to give anyone legal advice. Melissa asks, how do I email you? You can email coffeedatewithtina@gmail.com if you'd like to submit a question. And I'm kind of going through them in order that I receive them. I have, so again, coffeedatewithtina@gmail.com. If you'd like to submit a question. And I have a whole stack that I'm just going to kind of keep going through them chronologically. And so tune in and I will get to your question if you've sent it in and if it's something that relates to everyone. Those are the ones I try to share. And because, like I was saying, I can't give legal advice. I'm not an attorney. None of this is intended to be legal advice. I'm sharing, I try every person that I talk to, I try to say, how would I have handled this if I were in that person's shoes? And then sometimes I share things that I've seen other people do, other strategies, but ultimately your attorney is your voice in the courtroom and your advocate. So anytime you're going to implement something that you picked up here or anywhere else, run it past your attorney first, because they are driving your case. So one of the things I talk about a lot, and one of the questions that came in is, choosing your battles wisely. It's something that I say all the time. If you've taken any of my online courses or if you're one of my coaching clients, I'm constantly telling people, choose your battles wisely. You don't want to contribute to the he said, she said of the family court system, or just the water gets really murky and you don't want to play a part in that. So prioritize. But this person asked, when you say that, can you give examples? So with my ex-husband, a lot of what he would do is throw out accusations that were completely false. Some of it was just to rattle me, some of it because when he put something in writing, he's so important that he thinks it's fact now that he's put it out there. And so that's where canned responses come in really handy. If you haven't downloaded these, you can go to the One Mom's Battle Instagram page, and one of the options when you click the link in the bio is canned responses. So a good one to respond to those type of messages is, I do not feel these misrepresentations warrant a response, and I see no purpose to this email other than to increase conflict. As such, I am noting my objection, and your attempts to portray me in a negative light have been noted. So there's things like that to where don't engage, don't go there. Let's see, many of the canned responses can't be used with our family wizard. I wonder why. Because of the tone meter. So, and I should give a disclaimer. These are a compilation of things that people at One Mom's Battle on our Facebook page, which is an amazing online community. A lot of these are compilations. Some of them I personally wouldn't use because they're kind of harsh. And, for me, it has, the tone meter catches them. So, let's see. I'm trying to see if I can find one as a, you'll have to, follow what's best for you. And I know tone meter can be overridden if need be, but you have to do what's authentic and true to you. It doesn't, somebody just said, it doesn't mean you shouldn't use them. The tone meter picks up and it's kind of a checkpoint going, do you really want to send this? And so I encourage you, really be careful. And I think it's when that tone meter comes up, it is warranted to look at that. Somebody said, turn the tone meter off. I don't have that feature. Hi, Abby. I appreciate you so much, Abby. I love your comments. And I know I just said that this morning on YouTube. Another example of choosing your battles wisely, child support. And it's a sensitive topic because I've been on both sides of it. I've been where I was absolutely dependent on child support to feed my kids and to keep my electricity on. So when I talk about this topic, there's absolutely no judgment. If you are in that position where you need the child support and that is a battle you have to choose, by all means, that you do what you need to do to keep your kids with a roof over their head. I've been there and I have a tremendous amount of compassion when it comes to this topic. Um, at the same time, my goal since day one was to get off that roller coaster so that if I got child support, it was a welcome bonus, but I didn't plan my bills and my rent and things like that around receiving it because the financial abuse portion of I call it post-separation abuse. The financial abuse portion is a huge one, and it's really common for these people to use that as a way to continue to control you. So my goal was to free myself from his control. And part of that was, I don't care how many part-time gigs I had to take on or extra hours I had to work. There was a few years where I literally lived on coffee and was really just trying to survive. And there's periods of time that it was a blur because I was working so much. I was representing myself in court and I was a full-time mom. So, the child support, if you can, your goal, move to the place where you can use it as leverage would be, there was a point where I said to my ex-husband, because I knew he was only fighting to get to 50-50 because of the child support calculations. So there was one point where I said to him in person, Seth, I'm willing to put it on paper as 50-50 custody physically, or, the calculations, the financial support calculations as 50-50. So this becomes a moot point. And the reality was, even in one of our first child custody evaluations, the evaluator basically gave him a step-up plan to get closer towards 50-50. And I agreed to set child support calculations at that point. He never even took the next steps to get to that step-up plan. So essentially I called his bluff and it proved me, correct, that that's what it was all about for him. So child support was a battle that I never held him accountable for. And for anyone who has followed my story, that, my arrears balance started back in 2010 at about $15,000 because I caught him not paying bonuses. I was able to prove in court that he wasn't giving me the percentage of his bonus checks. And then that arrears balance grew starting from 15,000 to over 100,000. And that was the leverage I needed. I knew money was his biggest button. And so I was strategic and I never held him accountable for that back pay. I did try to once on a contempt charge, and I left with my tail between my legs because I didn't know what I was doing for the contempt charges. So, and choosing your battles wisely, really my mindset was, will this matter in a year? Will this matter in 6 months even? Those were kind of some of the checkpoints. Or, if it will matter in a year, if this is something affecting my kids here and now and could potentially affect them down the line, that's a battle I would choose. So hope that helps. I know that was a very long-winded response. The next question, somebody asked with attorney fees, because my ex-husband did have attorneys most of most of our custody case. And there were a few times that we were both in pro se, but not usually. It was usually just me in pro se, and he could afford the attorney. So, did his side ever ask me to pay his attorney fees? And the answer is yes. I was never ordered to. They tried a couple of different times. Um, one of those times was when I did try to hold him in contempt for child support. And what I didn't realize was that it was more criminal proceedings. And so it was a lot different than arguing my case in family court. And while I thought I knew what I was doing, I didn't. I lost, even though I could show that he lived in a mansion in San Francisco and wasn't paying his support. It was procedural, and I looked like a deer in headlights. And so his attorney, I was in shock because, after he owes me, at that point, he probably owed me $40,000 in arrears. And I just felt so defeated. And then his attorney put his hand up and said, Your Honor, we'd like to ask for attorney fees to be awarded. And the judge was literally getting up and walking off the bench at that moment when his attorney said that. And the judge put up his hand and said, No, we're not discussing that. So, I had a great judge. It took about 4 years for him to see that I was not part of the conflict in the end. And as frustrating as it was, when I'm able to look back at my case from a different vantage point, I do feel very blessed that overall, I have complaints and arguments about my judge, but I miss him. I wish he was still on the bench because our local system here needs someone like him back on the bench and everywhere. He saw through my ex's BS eventually and held him accountable. And I know that's not that common in the system. So somebody that I know and love sent in a question. Last week I talked about going to sit in your courtroom, and somebody wrote, so your child support administration never got involved in your arrears. Oh, they did. They just, it's part of the system. It's broken. And so they were involved from day one. I had turned my case over to him, but they are monitored or graded on current collections. There's a whole calculation. I actually got to sit down and have coffee with somebody who's very high up in the child support agency, and he gave me a lot of insight into the realities. They're audited, would be a better word, on current support, and so the arrears balance doesn't really weigh in. They do get some points for how much arrears, but as long as my ex was paying something, if his child support was $500, if he paid $5, it kept it from flagging the system. Good morning. So there's lots of games they play. Even paying $5 a month will keep it from flagging their driver's license, their passport. That's, if I had the capacity, that's one system that needs to have a complete overhaul, as many of you know. But so back to the question. Last week I talked about the importance of getting to know your local system, going to sit in the courtroom, watching proceedings, watching your judge, watching other family court professionals in your local area. And I got a question afterwards that said, I don't have, what do you do if you simply do not have the capacity to do that, to take off work, to miss work, to go do something like that? So, those, and I get it because I've been there also. If you absolutely can't, try to think outside of the box. If you have to take off a couple of hours work for a doctor's appointment, cap onto that. Even if you could go sit in there for 1 hour, it can be invaluable to, you never know what you're going to hear just popping into that courtroom. Or she asked, can you have a friend or family member go in your place? She actually asked about recording proceedings, which is, I know here in California, a big no-no, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. I don't know what the laws are in other, will it look bad to sit in on hearings with my own judge? You know, whenever I was asked, what are you here for? I would just say, I have an interest in family court and I'm just here to observe today. My judge saw me in court all the time. And he would look at the docket and go, Swithin, what are you here for? And I would just say, I'm just an observer today, Your Honor. And it never affected my case. It's most states. I know, I think Hawaii, Florida, I think there are a few states where it's not open to the public, and I think that's really wrong. And those are, when I see that happening, I'm of the belief that every single courtroom should be video recorded, so that we can go back and look at footage and keep judges accountable and in line. I am a firm believer that every single courtroom should be recorded at all times. So, when they're allowed to operate in the dark, Florida, I know for sure Florida is a closed courtroom state. Shady things happen in the dark, and I know that's really, audio CDs in my court is only $20. That's fantastic. I wish we had that. You have, here in California, you have to hire a transcriptionist, and I went back about a year ago and tried to back order a lot of my transcripts because I just wanted records, in case my daughters ever want to read when they get older and they're adults, what actually transpired. Or if I need, so much of my case, it's foggy. I would love to, when I'm rewriting my first book right now to tell the whole story. And, it's really helpful to go back and get transcripts and actually look word for word. But talk about expensive. I couldn't believe how much money I had to pay to get transcripts, and I still haven't got all of them because it's a lot of money. So with the question, sitting in the courtroom, if you have somebody on your team, a close friend, your sister, a family member who would be willing to do that and would be able to do that and really understands what you're up against and what they should be taking notes on and observing. And even if they don't initially, they're going to learn pretty quickly. Observing other cases and going, wow, that case has a similar thread, whether it's alcoholism or emotional abuse or whatever it is. Somebody said, how do you move through panic attacks and flashbacks in the courtroom to sit and observe? It's a hard one. And I'll tell you when, for me personally, when it's not my own case, it's almost been a way to desensitize myself to the process, and it has made those feelings and the anxiety so much better, because I just became desensitized to the process. For me, so much of the anxiety was being in that courtroom, giving my power and putting my kids' lives into the hands of another person who really didn't know us. And so to kind of see it from a different perspective, like, because I've sat in the courtroom so often, I have a completely different, I wouldn't say appreciation, a different perspective for the system. I couldn't be a judge. There's just no way. I do think that they are overburdened. I think that they become very calloused and numb to the issues. They start to, put everything on a scale of, this week we had a child who ended up in ICU because they were physically beaten. And so anybody else's problems over here on the scale are, it doesn't even register for them. And that's not fair. Anytime a child is suffering, whether it's emotional abuse or extreme physical abuse, it all matters. But I do see how it happens. I make a conscious effort every day to not become desensitized to the things that I'm hearing. But it takes a toll on you. I have a respect for anybody who works in the system who is an honest, ethical person, because I do believe it takes a toll. But so yeah, getting back to that question, if you do have somebody in your life and you aren't able to take off work, even if you can take off 2 hours a couple of times a year just to learn your local system, I do think it's really important for you personally to be there. But second best would be somebody who knows you, who loves your kids, and who can take notes. In my state, any divorce case that is on appeal has to file a transcript of the trial. So the transcripts are available for other, yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty common. So the next question, oh, this is a good one, and it comes up a lot. Her ex constantly threatens court and holds it above her. And so it keeps her, my guess is, operating in this state of fear. And so I guess my question would be, if you are in that position, because my ex used to do that a lot to me, um, you look at it from, more of a forensics, a strategy mindset, and go, okay, he's threatening every week that he's going to take me to court, but does he actually ever follow through with it? Or are these just words? And I had a client, in the past month, who we were talking about this exact topic, and her ex is constantly threatening to put her back in front of the court. And I said, let's break it down. Does he really want, he's got a standing in the community, where does he really want the dirty laundry aired in there? Would it affect his image? And she started thinking about it, and she said, I really don't think he wants to go to court. So he was projecting. Her fear of court was actually his fear of court. So every situation is different. There are some of these guys who actually love to go to court. And so the threat could be very real. And that's where, if you can get across to the judge that this is legal abuse, and name it for what it is, that's a good direction to go towards. I know in California you can have somebody labeled a vexatious litigant, and there's actually a list that they keep. I don't know how it works in other states, but if you are truly being dragged into court over and over again for frivolous things just to use the system to hurt you and control you, then that's a different story. But what I find is that most of these people, when they're making those types of threats, it's actually their fear they're projecting onto you. And so would I call somebody out on that? No, that would be a battle I would choose wisely. I'm not going to engage with him on that. I would just let it go and tune it out. I wouldn't react to that type of threat. Mentally, I would say go for it. I would mentally call his bluff, but I would just completely overlook that portion of the threat in the email. With emails, when I get one, or when I see an email that a client has received, I just skim them. What is the actual thing? You find that there's 1,500 words to ask there's only one little tiny sentence that is relevant and needs responded to. Those are the novelist type who just write and write and write, and because you are their feed, and this whole conflict gives them such a huge feed. So it's mind-blowing to me how much time some of these people spend writing these crazy emails. What happens when a spouse totally evades everything in regard to the divorce proceedings? Like completely checks out and Usually my guess is there's like default judgments. Um, I don't know specifics, but feel free to, yes, if they completely checked out and walked away, I'd pop a bottle of champagne and toast to that. That it's not normal. So there would be a part of me that would be going, what's going on? And why? But there are some people who, just become an ostrich and bury their head and can't deal with him, or with the situation in general. And so they just check out, and it happens. So, I would talk to your attorney about, so cool to find you live this morning. Yes, I'm here live every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. He's threatening to play victim. Let him play victim. These people, these narcissists, sociopaths, anybody in these categories, they need a victim card, and their victim card is usually really strong. And so by all means, be a victim. I will play right along with you if you want to be a victim. So the next question, this is more specific. I know so many people are dealing with issues related to the shelter in place orders. This particular person has a young daughter, and her ex has a family member who was traveling and now needs to be quarantined for 14 days before her daughter can go over there. So they have an agreement in place now that she gets to keep their little girl for 14 days until the quarantine orders are lifted. But now he's saying, well, to be fair, now I get her for 14 days. And that would be traumatizing for this child who's never been away from mom for that long. And the mom's question was, how is this fair? He had a choice to allow this family member to travel. It's not my issue or my daughter's issue that there's now a quarantine. And so why should my daughter be made, to do this? And on the phone, it sounds like dad said to the little girl, you're with mom for 14 days, and then you're going to be with me for 14 days. I don't know how old she was or if she could even grasp that, but it broke my heart because planting those seeds with a child. I know when my ex-husband, when he was stripped of his overnight visits, he would take my daughter, and they were relieved and grateful and hated sleeping at his house. And then he would take them shopping for new beds and new bedding and talk to them about how they were going to start sleeping at his house again. And my little girls would come home and they would be so distraught. And it's just, it's painful to watch. It's baffling when parents have never been in a kid's life or given custody. Yeah, it is. Very broken system. So in a situation like this, my recollection of the email is that mom is working, there's a PC or there's minors counsel or somebody involved, I believe. I would be voicing my opinion strongly if I were facing a situation such as this. They're likely going to allow him to make up the time, but I would be very vocal and very clear that that's not what was in my daughter's best interest if I were in, and so offering up other solutions would be my strategy. And that would be, I'm willing to add on, one extra day over the next 14 weeks to make up for that time. But, it would, or add one extra overnight per week for 14 weeks, whatever, to make up that time if you are truly going to have to do that. Because that, and I would say, for me, it's not an issue of him not getting his time back. It's an issue of doing what is in my daughter's best interest and being away from her primary parent for 14 days straight, especially when she mentioned that this person does not allow FaceTime calls. is restrictive when it comes to contact with the mom, that's where I would be really, having a plan in place and not agreeing to this. That would be a battle I would personally fight, because when back to, is this going to matter in 6 months or a year? Yeah, I think that is an incredible amount of trauma to put on a small child. And so that I would gauge that based on, will this matter? Yeah, it's gonna matter. That could cause lasting trauma and anxiety for her. So I would fight that battle. But you still have to present. So much of this is how you present to family court professionals, and you want to be seen as somebody who's, trying to sing kumbaya, trying to co-parent, trying to work together, but keep bringing it back to, this is not in my child's best interest. He might refuse to give her back. That's my concern too. You too could own a mug like this. Go to our Etsy store. It's hard, these, and I know that I'm getting so many emails from people who haven't seen their kids in weeks, because the people are taking the shelter in place orders and twisting them to be very self-serving. How did you fight the battle when the narc has coached the child to testify against you in court? Oh, that's a hard one. I never personally experienced that. I don't know how old the child is. Every state has different rules and policies in place for, what's acceptable in age for them to talk. In California, our age is 14 before they'll talk. And I'll tell you, and I've talked about this a lot, those teen years, if you're talking about a teenager, are really difficult. Even under the best of circumstances, you've got a teenager with, their brains are growing and changing, hormones, plus manipulation from another parent, the other unhealthy parent who's using them as a weapon. It's a difficult time, especially when the other parent a lot of times will say, look, we have no rules over here. You have all this freedom. You have the latest electronics, and they're trying to buy the child and manipulate the child, and it works at that age. So I don't know how old your child is, to the person who just commented, but let's see, I have a 16, 13, 7. The 16-year-old is completely against me, convinced I'm setting her. Oh, it's hard, because my guess is that at 16 years old, they're probably going to give that child somewhat of a voice. I know here in California they would. My goal would be to show the court that this child is being used as a pawn, if I were in your shoes, and that, for whatever, I'm just guessing that buying them at age 7 works too. It absolutely does. It's so wrong. And these kids are used as weapons. And, you have to have a tremendous amount of empathy for the spot that they're in also, because I know when I met my ex-husband as a 26-year-old girl, I didn't even have the tools to combat love bombing and the manipulations and tactics that they use. So I always try to share that perspective with people who are dealing with this, is, this child didn't choose to be put in the middle, neither did you, none of us. It's horribly confusing and painful for them, and they're literally, they're just not equipped with the tools that they need to recognize what manipulation looks like. So I try to put myself back and go, at 26 years old, this was hard for me. This was confusing. I would go from the love bombing to the absolute chaos. And then the part of me that really, sees the best in people would justify the negative behavior by saying, but he was, he has that in him. He's so good at his core. That's who I met. That's who I fell in love with. He's still in there, but the reality is that wasn't true. That was a facade in the beginning. It was an act. So I can see how these kids get to be so manipulated by these people. And as a healthy parent, talk about gut wrenching. My heart hurts for you to be in that situation, but keep letting your child know, I love you unconditionally. I'm here. I hate that you're in the middle of a situation that is a very adult topic. And I'm not going to talk to you about this topic because you're still a minor, and your job is to be a kid, and you only get that chance once in life. But I love you, and sending notes every day, sending text messages, reminding them, if you find an old picture of the two of you together, send it over and just say, oh my gosh, I just came across this photo. I love you. It made me remember some really happy times in our lives. And just, keep that going, because they need you. And when left to deal with these individuals on their own, when you are out of the conflict, it usually implodes. 9 times out of 10, they are going to see the other person's true colors. Right now they're aligned in some ways, and you are the target. And that's painful and it's hard. But when you remove yourself and just focus on your relationship with that child, and not feed into the conflict, they will implode. It's a matter of time. So my heart goes out to you. Let's see. We are about to end here. I've got kids waking up in the house by now, I'm sure. I'm out. I have a little mobile office that we set up for those who have followed my journey. Gosh, I look back to December when I bought this mobile office, and I don't know if I was predicting this crazy time in our world, but what a blessing it has been. And this topic is such a difficult one. If I were needing to work from home right now, I don't know how I would do it with my kids. And so it's a blessing, but I'm going to go and enjoy the day with them and take some downtime. So love to all of you. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do. And if you haven't watched our video that just got released yesterday with the amazing Dr. Ramani and Rebecca Zung, top 1% attorney, please go watch it. And we're going to release part 2 Monday. So love to all of you, and take care of yourselves.